Thank you very much, Rebecca. Thank you so much to everyone for being here today. We're thrilled to spend the hour with you, and thank you for taking either maybe a brunch hour or lunch hour, depending on where you're sitting. But we really are looking at this time of year as healthcare executives and strategists. And as that weather starts to get cold, we always start to put the hat on of what am I planning for next year? What are we getting our arms around now that maybe the operational heft of whatever my day-to-day duties have been are potentially slowing a bit? And how are we making sure that we're making the most of everything that we're pushing forward with in 2023? An absolutely central theme, no matter where you sit, whether you're with a plan, a provider, a vendor. We all know that we have access to populations in the healthcare space here, and member engagement is absolutely tantamount no matter where we're sitting. So we'll get into the content a little bit, talk about who we are and why we feel we've got a voice to share some of our insights in this space. But really, that's where we're going to spend all of our time is when you're thinking about member engagement and how you're going to capitalize on it in 2023. What are some of the trends that you should be bringing to those strategic planning meetings here in Q4 or getting into early Q1 of 2023 and actually putting these things to life? So as we do that, we got a brief introduction. Thank you so much from Rebecca. Again, I'm Drew Corbett. I'm the Vice President of Product Innovation at Clarity. We'll share a little bit about who Clarity is, just so you sort of know where we sit before you tell you where you stand. But also on with us today, and I'll hand it over to Adrian, is joining us today from Engagys. And Adrian, maybe you could give just a brief background for folks.
Sure. Thanks everyone for joining today. My name is Adrienne Tenney. I am Director of Quality and Operations at Engagys. I've spent the last 23 years in healthcare, working on everything from technical implementations to consumer engagement, A/B testing. And Engagys is a healthcare consumer engagement consulting and research firm. We are laser focused on healthcare consumer engagement with everything that we do.
And I'm Scott Roderman. Nice to meet everybody. I am coming from Clarity, Chief Innovation and Strategy Officer. I've spent the last 30 years in healthcare. Most notably, about 15 years ago, started a company in the member engagement space. We did a whole bunch around AI chatbots, rewards, predictive analytics, multi-channel, and I think what we're going to lean on today is a lot of lessons learned, both positive and negative, what worked and what didn't work. And I think look forward to the conversation today.
Yeah, I mean, as I think about that, Scott, we're probably 10 to 15 years of having the industry keeping member engagement at the forefront of pretty much every strategic year and strategic plan. I think that's a very different thing than how well have we really cracked the nut. And so there are some wins, there are some losses. And I think exactly as you said, we'll be able to go through many of those today. Mm-hmm. Again, just because Clarity is going to be new to a lot of you, we wanted to give you a sense of where we sit in the market, and that hopefully sheds some light on why our perspective has become our perspective. So, we really have become absolutely focused on accelerating member engagement for healthcare organizations. We do this in a combination of software and hardware. But really, if you think about member communications, think about the actual asset or a letter or a member guide that ends up in your mailbox at your home. That's going to have oftentimes a health plan or a provider logo on it. But Clarity is a back-end partner that is developing, producing, data managing, and printing and fulfilling all of those assets. So we really come at this from the perspective of member communications. They are engagement opportunities. They are those marketing opportunities. And, from a footprint standpoint, we deliver over 150 million communications annually. So this is, we have probably interacted with most of the folks on the phone, albeit through the logo that might be your health plan sponsor, but working with about 100 health plans in the United States every year as well. So when I mentioned some of those assets that we distribute, and you're starting to see how this is a conduit to that opportunity for engagement, when you receive an ID card in the mail, when you receive an annual welcome letter, maybe even an explanation of benefits or some of the regulatory documents like 1095s, all of this paperwork is coming out of the Clarity shop. And in doing that, we have really realized that the packages that Clarity is distributing on behalf of health plans, they're read at a very high open rate, and they're read for a long period of time. And I think this stands to reason if you're thinking about receiving that envelope that has a card inside and you can feel that, it's something that you're really likely to open because you know that this is, one, really important and related to your health benefits, and two, has something you likely need in the form of an ID card that you're ultimately going to put in your wallet. This webinar is talking about engagement trends. It's not talking about Clarity, but I bring you that background because our clients have really started to push us to say, hey, if you're touching all of these members and you're doing so at such a high open rate and with such a high read rate, why aren't we connecting some of our member engagement strategies into the work we're doing with you? And that over the course of the past 4 or 5 years has really taken Clarity deep into the space of member engagement, brought us into partnership with great consulting firms like Engagys, and hopefully has really put us in the seat of expertise here. So all of that is the background. We're really going to be focusing today, though, on our agenda and the trends for 2023 that we continue to see are persisting as relevant for all of you to consider. And so, Scott, I'll hand this over to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Drew. So as Drew mentioned, the top trends, there's a lot of experience that Adrian brings, that Drew brings, that myself, we bring to bear. And I think there's some key topics we want to talk through, right? If you think about one of the top trends, behavioral science. Now, this is not just a nice buzzword to lay out there, right? If you really think about other industries, whether it's travel, entertainment, the financial industry, these are known practices, known techniques that are going to drive the right engagement with the right level of participation and action completion by that consumer. So we're going to show you some of those techniques and what works, because the use of color and imagery and QR codes and how you frame the message, the words matter, and it's going to get the action that you're looking for, right? The second trend that we're looking for is personalization. Right? Everybody loves to talk about personalization, but just bring it down to a quick example. If you are a uber healthy senior versus a very unhealthy senior, let's say you're polychronic, what is going to resonate with either one of those two is going to be very, very different. And if you're a health plan, right, what's going to really move the needle for Medicare is speaking to those folks in a certain light. So you want to be able to drive a very personalized message to get the right action completed. We love to talk about multi-channel. Multi-channel, if you think about text and SMS and email and phone calls and direct mail and all these different means to reach that end consumer, I think the key takeaway that we're going to talk through today is the messaging needs to be coordinated. Right? It's not just the ability and the capability to reach them through all these different channels. We've got to be speaking to that end consumer with a very consistent message, right? Because we all know from a marketing standpoint that repetition and that consistency of message is going to lead to the right result. Analytics, right? Everybody loves to talk about analytics and the power of data, and it's true. If we can target the right consumers with the right message, the likelihood of success is that much greater. But how do you leverage that predictive analytics? Everybody's got their analytics shops internally. They're all spinning up all sorts of lists of these people do this, these people do that. How do you make it actionable? What we're talking about today is how do we not just talk about it, but how do we make it actionable? And then I sort of hinted at this a little bit, but as you think about real results and star ratings and HEDIS scores really starting to drive that true ROI. I gave you the example around Medicare. I mean, that's just one example, but I mean, really trying to focus on that consumer. And in that example, say it is that senior, trying to focus on a particular screening or a particular star rating that you're focused on. Maybe it's bone density scan. Maybe it's, colorectal. Maybe it's breast cancer screenings. Maybe it's a whole bunch of different items. How do we focus on those particular actions and drive results. The whole point of this is we want to use the right techniques, but we got to make sure that we're proving the results and actually having a meaningful impact on your business. So with that, why don't I turn that over to you, Adrian, and talk through behavioral trends.
Yeah, thank you, Scott. Great introduction to all the trends we're going to talk about today. So behavioral science is something that I could talk about for probably the next 3 hours, but I'm going to do something very quick just to give you guys a sense. And in terms of trends, I wouldn't say this is a new trend, right? Behavioral science hit the scene probably 10 years ago. It's been very effective, as Scott mentioned, in other industries. So it's not surprising that it's made its way into healthcare. But the trend that we are seeing now is more traction. More people are more open to using these techniques and tactics than ever before to impact behavior change. So what you're seeing here is sort of a simplified approach to behavior change. So the idea that more people are open to impacting behavior change with these tactics is great, but talking about it and doing it effectively are two very different things. So what we've got here is what we call the 5 Bs. So working in a little alliteration to make it more sticky for you. The first 2 Bs are for behavior, and that's because it's so critically important. Behavioral data is 5 times more predictive than demographic data. So if you're struggling to unlock behavioral data, those member interaction histories that you might have, keep going and know that it's worth the effort and the investment because it's really going to unlock that predictive power for you. So when we think about behavior, we think about it in terms of goals and the data. You always want to start with the behavior that you're trying to change, and you want to layer in that data so you really understand where your members are and what they're doing, because that behavioral data is so much more powerful. And understanding what they do is going to allow you to gather insights, unlock that engagement, and then craft your messaging to include barrier support, benefits, and behavioral science, those last 3 Bs. So again, this is very high level, but the idea is you're always going to start with that behavior. You want to understand what that goal is and that problem that you're trying to solve. And you're going to really tailor that message for your members based on what you know about them and how they interact with you. And applying behavioral science theory takes time. Proven application in healthcare is pretty tough to come by. And when you do find it, it's usually very case specific. So finding a partner that has experience with applying what works is important for really accelerating those results. As an example, we've been partnering with a lot of our clients to incorporate these kinds of tactics into their CAPS strategy and their CAPS communications. So our expertise allows us to leverage less obvious tactics sometimes, things like empathy, or maybe really drilling down to align the particular approach or tactic with custom segments or personas that we've developed for them. So what you're seeing here is a grid of some of our favorite behavioral science tactics. One of the easiest and most powerful examples on here is in the top left, FOMO. I think we've all experienced FOMO at some point, and it can be a powerful motivator, right? Think about how many times you've been on the edge of breaking plans, and then FOMO kicked in, and you find yourself out with friends or family having a great time. In that scenario, whatever your barrier was to getting out the door, FOMO was that little nudge you needed to help overcome it. Now, a healthcare example we're providing here, this works well with live agent or even in-person interactions and communications. When you get a no answer from someone, just by asking a follow-up or what we call a second chance question, like, are you sure? That no will move to yes up to 30% of the time. And that's a very simple change to implement, and it can have a very powerful impact. Now, the effectiveness obviously depends on a lot of things, but knowing that it works on some level for a fairly broad population is a great place to start for actually applying it. On the flip side of that, the other one that I'll call out on here is in the bottom right, peer pressure. It's another tactic. If we all think back to our teenage versions of ourselves, we're probably familiar with peer pressure in some form. There's also a cousin to this that we call social proof, and that's the idea that a lot of people like you are doing something, and it gets you more comfortable with the idea of adopting it yourself or taking action on it yourself. These are also very broadly useful, but not so much with the senior population. It can actually be less effective with them, and in some cases, it can depress response. So it's not always enough to know the theory, and it's not always enough to understand what exactly the tactic is driving at. You have to know who it's working with and who it isn't working with as well. So I'll pause there because I know I said a lot. Any comments, Drew, Scott?
The thing that's coming across to me is how foundational these are as principles, and they're not appended to a particular communication medium. I know we're going to talk about channel mix later on, but the idea that we're really just talking about the psychology of participation. And when we then think about ourselves as healthcare strategists, that participation in fill in the blanks, Scott, you mentioned a lot of them earlier, if they're cancer screenings, if they're in-home assessments, if they're get to the doctor, whatever it might be that your business is focused on, the principles persist, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And the point I want to leave you with for this particular trend is that there's enormous opportunity with behavioral science. So consider every sentence as a chance for optimization. You're looking at a letter example here, but this could easily be an email, an SMS, a live agent script, an outbound IVR. Whatever method you're communicating in, this is a tactic that you can use. So finding ways to incorporate behavioral science as you navigate the various layers of communication strategy is really going to unlock new ways to affect behavior change. And it starts all the way at the top with your overall strategy and goals, and then flows down through targeting, segmentation, channel execution, message, content design. And the content design itself is kind of where our next trend comes in. But before I flip to that, I just want to pause to see if there's anything else that you guys want to jump.
Yeah, Adrian, maybe one comment here. I mean, we're just showing an example right here of a letter, but you think about all the communications that, let's just use a health plan as an example, are sending to the member. And, you know, whether it's a new member and you're providing them with an ID card, or you're providing them with like a member guide, or it's an explanation of benefits, or there's so much opportunity to introduce what you mentioned with behavioral science, right? So, you know, putting something in the upper right in that Johnson box, we've noticed that drives a tremendous lift in terms of action completion, right? How you frame the message in the body of this letter. These are so easy to make actionable, and it's having a meaningful impact. I mean, if you're moving the needle by a net of, 10, 15%, if you're sending out, 100,000 or 1 million of these pieces, you're starting to really drive a lot of change. And if it's, to Drew's point, driving an in-home assessment for the Medicare population, or whether it's getting somebody to opt into mail order pharmacy, I mean, there's real dollars here. So getting a couple of percentage points to move and actually adopt or complete that action has a real impact. And I know we're going to talk about that throughout the hour, but, one of the key themes and trends here is we want to say what we're seeing, but how do you make it actionable? And a lot of times these communications are happening underneath the operational area within the plan. And I think if you look at, the chief marketing, chief experience officer running all sorts of emails and text campaigns, et cetera, a lot of times these two things aren't connected as well as they could be. And I'm telling you, this is turning out to be one of the best channels to drive engagement, and just really syncing all these up, I think, is a critical takeaway.
Yeah, Scott,
Absolutely.
It makes me think of if different people on, everyone here has a vested interest in achieving better member engagement or consumer engagement just by virtue of joining today. What we may not all have is direct access into these communication mediums. So I think if I'm thinking about like what's a takeaway that I can garner from this, it's this is how thoughtful a communications piece is supposed to be. Maybe I'll send an email or knock on the door of some of those departments and just ask the question, am I layering or are you all layering different behavioral principles into our communications to members? If so, what are they? And if you get kind of a non-answer, it could be a really great place to introduce this as a concept and encourage those folks to learn more. Or if this does fall within the work that you're doing, just to start taking that finer tooth comb to it. But I think, Adrian, I mean, you might have more experience on this than I do, but I'd be amazed if you just knocked on doors and asked, are you leveraging behavioral science? And there may be a soft sort of a nod. And then if you ask, well, how? There may be sort of a blank stare. And that means you've got a low-hanging opportunity that you can pursue in 23.
Absolutely. And a lot of times the answer that we get when we kind of do that door knocking for our clients is, well, I know what it is, I think, and I'd like to use it. I'm not sure how to go about it. And, if we step back from behavioral science for a minute, another point to reinforce here is just the idea of cross-functional collaboration, right? If you're at the strategic level and you find out that the people driving your digital engagement are not somehow interacting with the folks in print operations to make sure that you guys are creating a unified experience for your members and that you've got that thread pulled across all of those different channels, that's a low-hanging opportunity, right?
Yeah.
You want to make sure that you're creating bridges across all of these communications, that you're tying all of them together. So Scott called out the Johnson box and the QR code, right? That's creating a digital bridge on a print communication. That's a fantastic opportunity. So if you don't have that cross-functional relationship happening organically in your organization, that's a great place to start. Call together some key players, have some conversations, introduce the idea of behavioral science and talk about what it means at your organization, how you might be using it. That creates all kinds of open doors that you may not have had yesterday. And so kind of tying this back, right? When we think about how we get all the way down a communications funnel, and that's something that we use at Engagys every day for every project we use across people, process, and technology. Thinking all the way at the top from strategy and goals down through the types of channels, the communication execution, and the message and design, it really comes back to personalization. And that's our next trend. And personalization is another trend that's not necessarily new, but it is shifting, right? Where things are headed now is micro-personalization. Sounds like another buzzword, but it's really getting at the heart of what's happening right now. It's not fair to expect that healthcare will match experiences like the Amazons or the Netflix of the world. It's a different relationship, and it deserves a different type of approach. But that doesn't mean we can't strive to incorporate some of what's working into our member experience. And it all starts with knowing your audience. So let's talk about convenience and what it looks like across different lines of business. For commercial populations, these folks tend to be younger, healthier, busier. They certainly want convenience, but they would describe it as fast, easy to access, and valuable. So what you're asking them to do is competing with a lot of other priorities. So you have to make sure that you're giving them an easy, seamless way to complete the action and ensure that value is attached to it. So incorporating insights like the ones you see here can make your communications feel more personal and increase the likelihood of response. As an example, vaccines are top of mind right now, right? Everybody's thinking about those COVID boosters and those flu vaccines. Families will respond more favorably to messages framed in cost savings versus staying healthy. So maybe those flu reminders shouldn't just be about avoiding the flu. Maybe include the notion of cost avoidance, time saved by not ending up at the doctor's office or the urgent care or the pharmacy. And there's lots of other insights in here, and you guys will have this deck, so I think some of these will just be little inspiration points, right? You might read them and think about something a little bit differently, but we do have two more. Medicaid and duals. What does convenience look like to them, right? We're thinking about personalizing across all these different populations, but we're talking about the same idea. How is it different for them? These folks experience more barriers in healthcare. Convenience is critically important to them, but they would describe it as easy to understand, easy to do, and having support to get it done. This population needs education to empower them, self-service tools to access barrier support, and simplified communications. So members in the dual population are 3 times more likely to report limitations with activities of daily life. These are tasks that the rest of us may take for granted. Things like getting dressed every day. So it's easy sometimes for us to miss them when we're thinking about communication strategy. So if you have a member who's needing help getting dressed every day, imagine how overwhelming it might be for them to coordinate an appointment and the transportation they need to get to that appointment, and then actually navigate all of that. So having this level of empathy and kind of keeping that human-centered design in play, pair it with some health literacy in plain language. You'll see here a call out for 3rd to 5th grade reading level. That can really make your communications and the benefits that you're offering to your members more accessible. And for this population, that's really going to resonate and make things feel much more personal.
Yeah, Adrian, as you're going through these, and I know there's another population here too, but I think it's, if we're not being self-critical and we're sort of giving ourselves a pass, then as long as we say dear insert name here, we're sort of giving ourselves credit for, well, we personalized it. And to me, noting the empathy and noting what the environment that this person might be in, that's the next layer deeper. And I think really is where we should be drawing the baseline table stakes of, if you don't know them at that level, it's going to be very hard to communicate at them where they are.
Agreed. So we'll land here with Medicare. And convenience for Medicare also means easy, but it's more tied to comfort and control. They want care they can manage themselves. They want to feel empowered, they want to feel a sense of control, and they want to feel ownership. And what we hear most from our Medicare focus panels is that they also want more communication from their plan. And they want it so they understand how exactly they can do what they need to do on their own. They want to understand what's available to them. It doesn't mean that they want to be bombarded with communications. They just want more insight, and they want that over communication about benefits and what's available to them. So how do you get this done? It starts with aligning your strategy and your goal. Think about your markets, think about your targets, your segments, and depending on your population, some things will be more effective than others, but the trends that we're starting to see catch on are things like two-way communication, which is especially effective with inbound personalization. So enabling the ability to identify who's calling and just picking up right where they need you to be and running with that. Deep links in digital communications are also especially helpful. And if you're tying them into QR codes as well, that's an incredibly useful tool. But that's ensuring that people get exactly where they need to go. Oftentimes, links will send them to a place and they're not quite sure. Are they clicking on this button? Are they on the right page? The directions that they got on the previous communication, maybe it was an email, didn't really land them where they needed to go and exactly the instructions that they needed to navigate through the next step. So we've been supporting clients on evaluating technology that can support all of these things, as well as variable content blocks and an increasing number of variable fields. So like Drew mentioned, gone are the days of member name, plan name, maybe the right member service number to call. We're seeing anywhere from 6 to 16 variable fields in a communication, as well as that variable content block opportunity that some vendors can offer. But what these things all do is enable micro-personalization and driving very targeted actions, which I think is incredibly important when we think about personalization, is that delivery of it.
Yeah, and to pick right up there on, ultimately we're doing this for a more positive member experience in general, but we also know that there's an endpoint of a shared interest between the member and his or her health and us as a business entity that has population management responsibilities over that person. So Scott brought these up really well in the opening and the intro, but we have to know where we're driving people. We have to know what our strategic priorities are because one, they're a benefit to the member at an individual level, and two, because they align to the business that we've constructed to support those members. And so when I think about the behavioral health principles and then I think about layering in the personalization and sort of blending those together, that's all well and good, but it only really matters if there's an exclamation point at the end of that sentence of, and so the member signed up to do fill in the blank. And so that's really, I think, one of the pieces of advice that we've got is not just to make sure that these feel like a good letter, but that your call to action is absolutely the seed at the center of everything that you grow in your communication strategy, and that that's coordinated and that it's deliberate. Conversations we're having with plans across the country right now, there is so much value in mail order pharmacy, depending on what the PBM arrangement is for that health plan. So if that is a priority, then are we leveraging these behavioral principles towards getting someone to sign up for that? Are we asking that follow-up question that Adrian mentioned, but are you sure you wouldn't like to save 30%? Whatever those tactics might be, I think we give a member a great deal of confidence of they know where they're being guided, as opposed to they have an endless universe from which to choose. And so doing them the service of a clear call to action that's concise and it's simple to take, that's really how we start to build a relationship, not just to achieve that one goal, but even a more longitudinal relationship, to add yet another buzzword, of once we have done this with the member, can we lead him or her along that breadcrumb trail so that they continue to get more value out of, in the case of a health plan, the benefits that we have provided for them. So we'll just show some of these. You all know that we're coming from the print and distribution industry on that side, so you'll see examples this way. But the takeaway is not that this is, in this case, a print piece. The case could be, as Adrian said, your SMS campaign. It could be your, this could be your billboards for all we know. This could be your email marketing strategy. The point is that everything you're looking at, are you putting that asset through the filter of, is this adequately personalized? Not just using a first name, but are we really reaching the person where they are demographically, behaviorally, etc.? And then are we layering in the appropriate types of behavioral health principles that are going to actually drive some of that action? And so whether we look at a member guide at Clarity, whether we're looking at distributing an ID card to someone for the first time of the year, and we know that that's going to have that high degree of resonance, people are ready to get their benefits sort of squared away and put that new card in their wallet. Those all offer different opportunities for where we can meet a person, not just in their health journey, but what might we want people to do at the beginning of a plan year so that they're getting the most out of their plan, and we can stave off some of that later stage attrition because someone felt like they didn't even get out of the gates with you. And so just establishing all of those things and looking at some of the collateral that they're reviewing, those can be the really key things of we're having a positive effect on their perception of their benefits and us as a plan, or maybe they're having a more sort of benign or not such a positive experience. It's made or missed with every single thing that they read that has your logo on it. I'm going to dig in on explanation of benefits just a little bit because it's a nice vehicle to talk about where healthcare data, which we oftentimes view as very constrained and limiting, can actually be the key to being really hyper-personalized, as Adrian was referring to it. So if we did sort of a show of hands and said, what's the most boring document in all of healthcare, we might all say that the EOB is right up there. It's oftentimes, I'm glad I got it because at least they know that I went and had an appointment, but I'm not really dissecting it very much. One, because it feels like it requires an actuarial background, and two, because there's not really an action associated with it ever. But I think there are ways that we can challenge that. And if we think about the amount of space that we've got to meet that person where they are, personalize that we did in fact know that he or she had an appointment in recent time, then we know a lot about where they're at in their journey. And we know a lot about the next steps that they might be able to take. And this is before we're even asking the question of, well, what occurred in that appointment or what ailment might the person have been seen for, just by virtue of having that healthcare interaction, there are so many things that as population managers, we want that person to do next. It's the right opportunity to say, let's go ahead and offer you a QR code to give you some instructions on what's next, or to give you that step 1, step 2, and step 3, you're just on the verge of completing that one. And so we're going to make it really simple for you to do that. You can see again how we go through and sort of dissect and map what are the behavioral principles and the personalization opportunities. It's that level of scrutiny that we really feel is where winning organizations are going to go in 2023. You will never get dinged for just sending out the EOB and calling it good, but you won't really advance against competitors or advance against the market if you're not taking these as opportunities to do a little bit better and put another sort of win in the engagement column. That's what we're looking at in terms of where the best organizations are really going to strive here. And if we really put on the healthcare strategist hat, what we're doing is tying our portfolio of benefits directly into a relevant healthcare interaction that a member has recently had. So if I do get an EOB back, and if you can see some of the line items at sort of top left here, if there's an A1C screening that we have coded for in that recent interaction, and as a health plan or a health system, my members or patients have access to OMADA, it is such a missed opportunity to not marry those two things together and say, hey, by the way, why don't you join the diabetes prevention program? Same if we were to go to musculoskeletal. Same to go if we were the 10th time that somebody had been to the emergency department this year and somebody wasn't aware of their telehealth or urgent care opportunities. This marriage of CPT codes, which again, we've always looked at as maybe limiting healthcare data, it's right there for us to say, what is the next best action based off of the information that you've got here? Now, again, I'm going deep on EOBs, and it really isn't the point to say what type of a document. It's asking, what do we have available to us that we know can be a nice conduit to helping the member take the next action that's going to be best for them?
Yeah, and Drew, just real quick, just to complement that, right? I mean, if we're coming at this from a lens of, the printing and the EOBs and the member guides and the ID cards, not to take away from all the effort that the rest of the organization is doing related to emails and texting and, data capture in terms of mobile phone numbers and opt-ins and all the other techniques. The question to ask yourself is, but are we really mapping every single touch point with the consumer?
Yeah.
And if you are, why are we driving by these pieces? If you're sending them a card, a member guide, an EOB, why are we not leveraging those budget dollars? I mean, EOBs are pricey. I mean, you're sending 6 to 8 of those things out every single year per member. I mean, you're talking millions of dollars, and not to leverage every ounce of marketing lift and engagement lift from those seems like a missed opportunity. So that's all we're pointing out is, let's make these things actionable. This is not difficult stuff, working with the right teams. And I think you'd be amazed at the additional lift you're going to get from an engagement standpoint.
It's actually a really good thought exercise. Like if you were to get into your biggest boardroom at your office and just lay out all of the pieces and print out the emails and print out the SMS and do all of those things and look at them and just be critical of, am I really moving the ball, or am I just checking the box that this got done? And when we say moving the ball, it's asking yourself, okay, are the behavioral principles here? Is this personalized to an advanced degree? Are we leading someone to actually complete a goal, or are we just giving them noise? It's a healthy thing to do at this time of year, and to think about, we know that the tightest competitors out there, their documents are going to look more like the ones we're seeing in this presentation. And so asking yourself if you're sort of in that echelon or not can be, I think, a productive exercise for teams. Sorry, Adrian, go ahead.
No, that's okay. I was going to say that, when we talk to clients, we often see that EOBs are their biggest print spend, right? And it's kind of a set it and forget it thing. They're complex documents. There's a lot that goes into them. So they're just going to leave well enough alone. But I think you guys provide a couple of very easy opportunities to just change small things about it so that it becomes more of an intentional and actionable document, right? It's not something you're just going to throw away anymore. All of a sudden you're like, you want to open them up and you want to see what that thing is that's now appearing that was never appearing before. So yeah, it's a unique idea. I hope more people take advantage of it. Multi-channel. So this is trend 3. And we'll move through this one pretty quickly. Creating a unified set of communications is something that everyone's striving for, and it is uniquely challenging in healthcare. There's a lot of silos. Data is definitely stuck in those silos. It's hard to create a very unified, a very intentional journey for your members that comes from a central source of truth. It's one of the biggest obstacles we see with our clients. But a multi-channel approach really allows you to meet members where they are and provide that seamless and accessible relationship that really delivers on consumer centricity. So when we think about channel mix, there are a few different ways to approach this. You can go with stated preferences. So this is what your members tell you they want you to communicate through. There's demonstrated preferences, which is what they're actually interacting with, right? So I might tell you email is my preferred channel, but that might be because I want it to be able to just pile up for a month so I can delete it all at the same time. That doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to interact with it, right? But if you have interaction history for those members and you can see that every time you send them something in print or every time you reach out to them through Live Agent, they're actually doing something, that can be a very powerful tool. In the absence of any preferences, just taking a waterfall approach can be powerful. Start with your lowest cost channel, start funneling through, and you can ramp up your channel expense as you get to those non-responders and you really want to try harder. You can also just go with proven channel and results, which sometimes can be case specific, right? So if you're targeting a particular campaign, look at the campaign year over year and see what your most effective channels were and who they were effective with. And those results can be a powerful way to really refine your approach. The other one that I'll call out is consider the journey. What is your end goal? What kind of interaction are you hoping for with the member? If you need a signature, think about landing on a print piece so they can easily sign it and return it. If you need input, think about two-way communications. If you're going with a longer interaction, something like an HRA maybe, offer seamless channel agnostic experiences that allow people to start in one channel, walk away, pick it up in another channel, and then finish it in the original channel they started with. That's a really great tool to offer to members because it allows them to do things in their own way, wherever they are and whatever they have time for. On the other side of that, you want to make sure that you're thinking about the channels that may not be the best for things as well. So, SMS is not easily searchable, so obviously don't use that for referenceable communications. And what you're looking at here is an example Medicare member journey. So at a high level, you're seeing all the key phases. You're seeing that enrollment phase, onboarding, activation, managing their care, navigating their care, and then re-enrollment. And all that's really underlaid by those key trigger events and those corresponding touch points that really drive retention and ultimately re-enrollment. So when you think about your communications and you think about the opportunities, make sure you're considering your channel mix along the way. Make sure you're choosing something that's going to be effective, meet members where they are, and look for opportunities to offer a primer. So if you know you're going to be reaching out to members, priming them in another channel, especially a preferred channel, can increase the likelihood that they're going to interact with that engagement. Another thing I want to call out here is ultimately what we're trying to do with all of these things, behavioral science, personalization, multi-channel approaches, is we're trying to enhance the member experience. So this is a collection of some insights. Some of it's from our focus panels that we do with Medicare populations. Some of it's from a recent JD Power study. And on the left, what you're seeing is the Medicare Advantage insights. What you're going to notice is that digital tools are increasingly a factor in member satisfaction. So portal registration is a fantastic place to start. But you have to make sure that that portal offers something of value. You have to make sure it's easy to use and that they want to keep coming back to it. That continued engagement is really what's tied to satisfaction. Because those Medicare members want more information, the ability to self-service is a great option for them. They really want more insight into what's available and how they can activate new and different benefits that they may not have been using before. One of the things that we heard recently was that a lot of the Medicare members in our focus panel didn't know that rewards and incentives were even part of their plan. But they said that if they did know about them, they would absolutely be interested in using them, and it would make them more likely to choose that plan again next year. So that's something to think about. On the right, you're seeing more of those commercial insights. So just calling out a couple of things here. Commercial populations are certainly more digitally savvy than Medicare. That's not to say that the Medicare population is not digitally savvy. They are increasingly adopting digital and have been for a while. But the expectations are much higher in those commercial populations. And technology in healthcare has been lagging for a while. So one of the big callouts in the study, in addition to digital, is call center performance. Call times are up, member sat is down. So making sure that you're investing in those tools for your call center is going to be increasingly important. Really find ways to empower them with access to the knowledge that they need to deliver on that customer experience and get them through those calls faster. That's going to go a long way to improving member experience.
Yeah, I think to agree across the board on this. The understanding the member in a year in the life, understanding where they're at in terms of their benefits engagement, all critical to it.
Yep.
The next trend that we want to speak to is something I am sure you have heard umpteen times within internal communications, within meetings, within what your organization's working on already, and that is within predictive analytics. And I think, so as not to say we're really going to teach anything new on this, but to say that those who are best leveraging predictive analytics will start to edge out in 2023. Those organizations that are maybe using the versions of this type of a discipline that were most robust 3-5 years ago. This industry is changing. This industry is getting more sophisticated. And I think one of the ways that we can speak to that is just looking at the difference between if we look at descriptive analytics. And so we're saying, okay, what does our population look like in the past? Moving to predictive analytics of what are they likely to do in the future. And really where we see this going in 2023 is more around how are those analytics becoming prescriptive. So it's not just about is this person likely to fall into a certain disease state, but it's, and then what do you do about it? And I think what I attach with that, what do you do about it, is the sort of how we're merging that information with the right message, the right member, the right time, and also understanding what their propensity to fall into action might be. So if we know that somebody might be getting into that more advanced disease state, that's very valuable information, but it is a little bit, it's a little bit unactionable. Knowing then that one person might be more likely to address that by having a telemedicine visit, another might be much more comfortable scheduling an in-home visit. Those are the types of things that we need to know so that we can appropriately intervene. Just knowing the state of someone's health isn't really sufficient anymore, and where the analytics and data models are going is the ability to say, and so this is the right type of outreach to that person. So when we think about 2023 and predictive analytics, whether that's internal teams that you're working with, or whether that's vendors that you're working with or maybe evaluating, I would ask and encourage that you all sort of press on that a bit of how far are you taking this analytics such that I actually know what to do, not just what's going to happen. It feels like a big leap, but it's a really important one if we expect ourselves to intervene in an increasingly effective way.
Yep. And Drew, I'll just pile on while you move to the next slide. Everyone has analytics. A lot of folks in that realm are still ramping up on healthcare domain expertise. So the result is models that are useful, but can be insufficient. So when you're thinking about those models that you're getting out of your analytics teams, find ways to incorporate needs-based personas and then personalize the action to those personas. And that can really unlock a lot more power, even if you're still having your teams ramp up on healthcare domain knowledge.
Yeah, and so let's think about how and where all this matters, because at the end of the day, we are all organizations that function based on our financial performance. So how do we take everything that we've talked about here and make sure that it's reconciling with where and how we're actually measured and graded as businesses? Adrian, do you want to speak a little bit to this?
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, we all know what the business value is for star ratings, right? It's incredibly incentivized, and it's a great tool to kind of pull that money back into your business and keep delivering a great member experience. But star ratings don't really matter to Medicare members. They stay because of their provider and their medications. So it's a good business investment to pay attention to stars and to do that work because it also helps drive member experience. But ultimately, retention is driven by things like, pharmacy benefits and provider networks. So don't lose sight of those things either. And there's a lot of changes happening in this space, right? A couple of the things that I've called out here. We've obviously seen the measures changing, the weighting changing, but instead of a regression to the mean, we've now seen more 5 and 3-star plans than ever before. So things are getting a little more extreme, and it's going to be harder to kind of work through those points differences. The focus on patient experience is well socialized at this point, right? We know we have to pay attention to that, but it's important because patience has been replaced with frustration, right? There's some forgiveness that was in play right after COVID, but that's going away. Members want access, and it's hard to get. So getting care quickly is down. Customer service is down, and complaints are up. So the barriers to succeeding with member and patient experience are getting bigger. And CMS is telegraphing interest in health equity. So paying attention to things like health equity, social determinants of health, and incorporating those now will help you later when those measures are probably going to come into play. We've seen the trend that this is something that's top of mind. So it's likely to land in the next several years.
Yeah, I mean, this is dramatic to me. So if we know how we're being graded, that is a huge input on how we should be developing our strategies. And so to see the opening up of how distributed our performance is going to be in caps and stars, leaning much more into experience, we know that that's where we should be placing our chips then and placing our energy. It's interesting to think though, just with we talk about 3-star, 4-star, and 5-star plans, and oftentimes I think it can make them seem like they are dramatically different in terms of their performance. And I think this is, these are just pulled directly from CMS. You can go look these up on your own. But to really get more intimate with what are the cut points between being 5-star in a certain measure and being 4-star, I think this is really motivating because sometimes it is only 1 to 2 to 3 percentage points difference. It's almost nothing, but the financial outsides on what that can do for your organization is just massive. And so getting to know, hey, if we're a 3-star, that means we're operating at this clip, but we really need to be getting up just 1 percentage point more. So what are the 3 or 4 things that we're doing differently this year that are going to give us a good chance at that? Adrian's point earlier was around, are you talking to different pockets of your organization? Clinical quality might know this like the back of their hand. They are not thinking about member engagement, and they're not thinking about communications. And so how we can start to bring these things together, I think, is a really important merging of organizational data. And ultimately, when we've talked with health plans about some of those goals, even outside of just what might be coming back in the form of a star rating, when we look at the top priorities, if we ran into a member or a patient on the streets and we wanted them to do one thing that could better their own sort of state of health and could also be an improvement for our business, we look at some of these, like downloading mental health apps and getting involved in the mail order pharmacy, getting cancer screenings, and there's real value at an individual level for those. So if we're getting, we're calculating it as an extra $1,000 in value for everyone who does those in-home assessments. Well, getting a few hundred people to do that all of a sudden starts to matter pretty quickly. And if that can be done by just, again, going back to putting behavioral principles into our communications, for example, then that starts to be some real wind in our sails financially too.